Welcome to Value Added, the real estate podcast where we speak with the brightest minds in the world of real estate who provide, create, and realize value in an ever-changing market. If you're a real estate professional delivering value to your clients, an investor creating value not seen by others, or a busy professional who passively invests in real estate to grow the value of their hard-earned dollar, then you're in the right place. And now your host, Nick Walters.
Hey gang, welcome to another episode of Value Added, the real estate podcast. On today's show, we're chatting with Terry Judge. Terry is the founder and CEO of Detroit, Michigan-based Core Solutions. They are a tax and engineering advisory firm. And today we're going to talk all things cost segregation in today's commercial real estate world. So without further ado, let's get on with the show. Terry Judge, welcome to the show. It's great to have you.
Great to be here, Nick. Excited.
So you started your current company, Core Solutions, I think 2006. Walk me through the opening years of starting your shop up and kind of how it's developed over the last 14, 15 years.
Wow, we're going back a ways. So yeah, my background was not in accounting, but I started Core as a cost expense reduction company, first and foremost. And then fast forward just a little bit, I got into the specialty tax area. My background was engineering, and really it found me. And I was so intrigued by this loophole at the federal level that they had all this money for commercial real estate investors. And I just immediately called my CPA and I said, what do you know of this? And he said, well, it's legal. And this was mind you, 15 years ago now, because I had a little ramp up before I actually opened up the doors. And then I started noticing that I started calling, many CPA firms around town, and everybody said it's legal, but they don't do it. I just couldn't believe it. And I'll tell you, fast forward now, 2020, there's still a lot of accounting firms have embraced it, but there's still a big number of smaller and mid-sized CPA firms that just don't offer this. They don't offer it in-house for the most part, and there's not a whole lot of companies that do what we do across the nation. So we just found a beautiful niche in this new, hidden treasure specialty tax area of the law. And, I just spend my day really educating to this, 15, 14 years later, I still just, doing a lot of educating around the country about, this, how it works, why it works, and don't let it be an afterthought. And I still see that it's being missed or underutilized as a tax strategy. And I'm talking about, our main service, which is cost segregation, which I can get into with you if you want to kind of, go that route. So.
Well, yeah. Listen, I'm a real estate guy, and with other peers and colleagues of mine, taxes are voodoo, right? But once you learn about not only the benefits of other tax related vehicles in commercial real estate, like straight line depreciation, then you add in cost segregation, and that's your world. So that's what we're diving into. So. Awesome. Why don't you give the listeners a little bit more, kind of in layman's terms, what cost segregation is and how it relates to the overall depreciation of real assets?
Yeah, so I'd like to just try to keep it, somewhat simple, but so I'd like to, I'll lay it out like this. So there's two pathways in the tax code. You already said it, straight line method. That is the normal accounting method in the United States. And that, if you and I go in and we buy a building, that building is going to depreciate over a long-term life. For multifamily, it's 27 and a half years. Office and commercial, it's 39 years. And you basically are going to depreciate that building over those years. That's a long time to let the IRS hold on to your money, but that's the only way that's been around. But there's another pathway that very few people know about, which is called cost segregation. It's been in the tax code since the late 60s. And basically the IRS says, you can take this other pathway and we're going to allow you to accelerate this depreciation or front load into the early life of the building. And now you can use that money to offset income. And when people hear that, they're like, God, that's a pretty cool concept where you can now take this depreciation. The IRS is actually going to allow you to do this. And if you're at you're a high net worth individual and you're paying ordinary income tax rates at, let's say, almost 40%, and you can mitigate that down to zero and then create like an open checkbook against future income in future years, because that depreciation, and you're taking it, let's say in year 1 to 5 versus waiting 27 and a half, you now have this chunk of change that you can offset and use that against income. That becomes very, very attractive. So knowing that, understanding that, and utilizing it right in the beginning, people always ask me, what's the very best time to do a cost segregation study? And it's right at the point of acquisition, right when you're going to purchase that building. And I always try to educate, some of my clients, say, hey, be sure to plan this as a part of your acquisition, not after. Because if you're syndicating and you're bringing on other investors, what a way! It's a very attractive way to add that into the conversation. And I'll tell you, Nick, I still see like so many investors, they're talking about cost segregation when they have to file the return, and now they're kind of being reactive instead of proactive, going backwards, and then trying to educate the investors. A lot of times it's like, why would you educate that investor prior to them writing the check just to put in their money as part of that deal? And now with bonus depreciation, wow, that just adds a whole nother layer, because now 100%, you can write off the building. You get a first year 100% bonus depreciation under some of the newer tax laws, and therefore the investors get a much bigger bang on the return on their money in terms of their initial investment. They'll get that on the K1, and now we're writing off 30, 40, 50% of the building in year 1 because of bonus depreciation. So that just now, again, game changer in terms of depreciation out of the gate.
So let's dig into cost segregation a little bit. So,
sure.
Instead of spreading out that the depreciation over a 27 and a half year schedule for multifamily, you're able to break that down into small, little smaller parts, but accelerate that. Tell us a little bit about how cost segregation, you can break down different parts of the building and the real property, and then kind of the modified timeline.
Yeah, so excellent. So the again, the IRS will allow us to break apart all the components of the building right down to the electrical jack. So wiring, plumbing, irrigation, drainage systems, retaining walls, curbs, outdoor wiring, all that stuff now can get written off. So you have what's called real property, and then you have personal property. So the IRS will allow you to move it from Section 1250 to Section 1245, and that's what really makes it legal. So you're just breaking apart hundreds of components, and and then you get into the basic stuff like non-load bearing walls. You got carpeting, fixtures, all that stuff can now be plucked into shorter life, which again could be anywhere from 1 to 5 years now. And what's beautiful about some of the newer laws, when we take the acreage and then let's say it's been developed, so you've got land improvements that now can be segregated, and those assets normally would have to stay in 15-year life. And because of the new laws, that 15-year life can now be moved into 1-year life. And therefore, it accelerates a much bigger chunk up front. And the other thing that's nice is, even for your listeners that are getting into real estate and maybe they just bought their first property, it used to be like about $1 million in purchase price was the sweet spot, like $1 million plus was economically made sense. Now we're doing a lot of cost segregation studies for properties that are the purchase price is around $500,000. And it still makes economic sense because we're taking so much more depreciation because of the land. You don't even have to wait 15 years now to write that off. You're getting it in year one. So that was a big game changer for some of the newer investors coming into the game, which is beautiful.
For the apartment syndicators out there that are pooling the money of other passive investors, limited partners, are there any similarities and differences between the general partner, the sponsor, and the limited partner, and how they're benefited from the use of a cost segregation study?
Yes, and yes and no. So the investors are going to get their fair share of whatever percentage they have in the deal as investors. Now, there are some accounting based on personal income. You got passive and active rules. I don't want to get too into the weeds. I would say, ask your CPA, but for the most part, they can participate through their K-1 on that depreciation schedule. So it is spread out through the ownership. Everybody's going to get their fair piece, whatever equity or piece of the deal, that piece will get spread out through the investors. And what's nice about that is there's usually one CPA handling that LLC, and obviously they're very astute into the real estate rulings. And as a cost seg firm, we work seamlessly with that accounting firm to make sure all of the depreciation gets implemented in the tax returns properly.
So, with utilizing a cost segregation study, there are so many advantages to hiring a firm like yours to, mitigate the overall tax liability of on a building. But what are the risks? Are there any risks associated with performing a cost segregation study?
So the IRS requires, they really require a third-party engineering firm to come in and do it under the engineering method. Now, there are some firms that do more of a sampling approach and more of a kind of a desktop approach these days. And, if the IRS does ever audit it, and there are, it's not the engineering approach, they could, I'm not saying they will, but they could disallow the entire study. And we've seen that before. So I would recommend make sure whatever company you hire, they actually have engineers doing the study. They actually do a site visit. That's very important. Because the IRS recommends it. There was something called the IRS Technique and Guidelines that was published in 2004. We follow that to the T, and therefore, in over 14 years, we've had zero disallowances, billions of dollars in savings for our clients. So we want to make sure all the T's are crossed, the I's are dotted, and it's a pretty thick report. But in the terms of cost segregation, I will say this, it's not considered aggressive. This does not open up an audit. This should not scare anybody to do this. And a lot of times people say, oh my God, cost segregation, it's aggressive. It's going to, what if it, I'm going to get audited. You don't want to mess around with the IRS. You want to make sure you do it right, but this is not something that is considered aggressive. This is something that's been in the tax code since the late 60s. It's gone through probably 6 or 7 different variations. But up until now, it's been the gift that keeps on giving because they keep enhancing it. Now, after the election, that who knows what's going on. I always tell my clients, listen, you got a portfolio of buildings, you got 1 building, you got 10 buildings, doesn't matter. And you're going to hold that property. Here's another little segue. People say, when should we not do it? Well, if you're going to flip the building or you're going to exit that building under 3 years, I would not recommend doing a study. And that's really one of the only reasons why you would not do a study if you're not going to hold it long term. And when I say long term, I'm saying at least 3 to 5 years, because you're going to get that time value of money, and you're going to be able to take advantage of taking that money in today's dollars versus waiting down the road where that value is diminished. So take that money today in today's dollars, build the empire, use it to offset income. What's beautiful about cost segregation as well, Nick, is that you can use it against other income through other LLCs. So one building you're creating depreciation can be used to offset income coming from other entities as well. If one building isn't kicking off enough profit, you can still use that. Some people are using cost segregation as an alternative to a 1031 exchange because they don't like the time window. Therefore, maybe you and I, and you might want to talk to this too, but we're seeing people paying way too much for a multifamily property because they have to, because they don't have time to do the due diligence. So they're overpaying on that side of the fence because they want to save money on this side of the fence. And you can use the cost segregation on the new depreciation, let's say the new acquisition, to offset income on other acquisitions. So there's a little bit of a shell game that can be played, and we kind of help our clients navigate through that. And people say, well, what if I take the cost segregation, and what if I sell in 3 years? What happens? Does the IRS want some of that money back? That is called recapture. They will want some of that money back. However, there is also, and this is important when you pick a cost segregation firm, that they understand this recapture and disposition of the property, because there's a way to book it. And I don't want to get too technical on your podcast, but there is a proper way to handle recapture where you will minimize that tax bill when it comes due. There's a way to put more into real property. Remember, your personal property is going to be written off very quickly, so there is no more value attached. And therefore, you want to put, when you're selling it, you're booking more of the real property value, and therefore you're not getting hit with, you're only getting hit with ordinary income on the personal property depreciation that you took in the early life. So there's strategy behind the way you package this and the way you go about this. Hopefully that makes some sense. And if you have any questions, I can.
No, absolutely. That's a lot of great information. I want to switch gears a second and go to, you guys are involved with consulting on opportunity zones. Is that correct?
So we got into the opportunity zones. It hasn't been out very long. We do work with a law firm here that we partner up with. They do kind of all the, basically all the paperwork and everything. After the opportunity zone is structured, then we can come in and put the cost segregation and layer it into the deal. So you're taking advantage of the future gains, and you're taking advantage of what we would call the as-built on the purchase price of whatever, that particular building that was purchased in that opportunity zone. So there is, just like 1031, there's kind of these hand-in-glove tax treatments, and each of them would be its own podcast on how that actually kind of goes together. But the good news is, by properly planning for that and how cost seg will fit into the opportunity zones, yes, it could be just a phenomenal home run.
Let's talk about the market today. You're based in Detroit, Michigan. We off camera before we started recording, we were talking a little bit about the Detroit market, but give the listeners a little bit about this resurgence in the Detroit market. I'd love to hear your thoughts on how that market has surged the last decade since the recession. And then I also want to talk about kind of the overall market conditions and how activity has been with customers contacting you with regards to acquisition activity in today's market.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm born and raised in Detroit, my whole life. Most of the time as a young adult, we had just a of a city. It was just crime infested, and we had corruption. Every mayor was just taking advantage, stealing money. Finally, as a lot of you guys know the history, you saw it play out in the news. One of our mayors has been in jail for going on, I think, 6 or 7 years now. So we've got some great leadership in Detroit now, and we've obviously with Dan Gilbert, with Rocket Mortgage and Quicken. That gentleman is literally, started the transformation, started buying buildings downtown, pennies on the dollar, put a lot of money in them, and slowly but surely we started to see the tide change, and we got out of bankruptcy, and that was a long period of time. We were billions in debt, and that has been now fixed and corrected. And I mean, in the last 10 years, or less, our whole city, and some of the people that now, when I used to say Detroit, people would giggle, chuckle, like, why do you live there? I mean, it was just more of a kind of a joke, number one crime cap city in the country. And now it's like when I travel, people say, "Oh, you're from Detroit, man." They're so enthused. They're like, "Oh my God, you guys are the comeback, city." Or I was just there. It was amazing. And we spent the night. I took my wife. People are coming into Detroit just to hang out, go to a sporting event. I mean, but we've built some of the best sports stadiums. We've got some of the best bars, restaurants. I mean, we've still got a little ways to go, but it's pretty fun being a part and just seeing the real estate side has just exploded. They build a multifamily structure down there, and it just fills right up. A lot of millennials are living downtown. We still got issues with our schools. So when people meet, they want to start, they get married, they want to have a family, they're still moving back out into the suburbs because of the school system. So once we get the schools fixed, hopefully that will, transform. Now, as we were sharing, this COVID hit, and because we had so many new restaurants open in the last, year, we probably won't see some of those restaurants, come back. And a lot of the bigger hotel projects that were slated this year, everything has been put on hold. Not everything. Some stuff are still moving forward. And I'm sure, after the election and first quarter of next year, hopefully all this stuff starts kickstarting again. But it has hit us pretty hard just because of the restaurants and the bar. And I'm just like every city. I know everything has been, just in that hospitality world has been hit. But overall, man, it's we're still rocking and rolling. As far as we're very busy as a firm, and we were doing a lot of 2019 work that spilled over as we closed out the tax year of July 15th, which was just last week. And now we're all just taking a breather. And then we still have spillover for a lot of companies that are filing extensions for September 15th. So we know some of our clients have put some projects on hold, or they're basically spending a lot of time back at their bank refinancing their existing loans and getting that tightened up and getting reduced interest rates. So that has been huge, I think, nationally in that regard. But I also think that some of the deals that were in the hopper, the investors are going back and they're renegotiating and getting COVID concessions. And so I think all that stuff being said, the multifamily industry, from what we've seen and all the people that I've talked to and all my clients, we do a lot of multifamily as far as cost segregation. Man, what a strong asset class. It is proved. Now, again, we have a little more to go. People are now, the unemployment checks are stopping. People have to get back to work, thank God. And we'll really see, we'll do the real test will be in the next 90 days. We'll start to see, where that's going to be at. But overall, that the commercial real estate just proves to be such a powerful investment strategy, even in these types of conditions.
Terry, we really appreciate the time. We're going to close out this episode with the hard-hitting questions. These are the questions that we ask every one of our listeners.
Okay.
The first question I always like to ask is, what is your why?
Oh, man. For me right now, it's just being able to help others. I think, first of all, I love what I do and want to give back more, and I'm trying to do a little bit more of life balance. But really just for my kid, to kind of teach him that, you don't have to work for the man. He's about to go to college. So I'm trying to kind of educate him the do's and the don'ts of the W-2 versus the entrepreneur. I want him to go work for other people, but I also want them to know what that's like, because it took me a little while to kind of get that right. So now it's just helping the younger folks kind of up and coming, not to make all the mistakes I made.
Besides your alarm, besides your alarm clock, what gets you out of bed every day?
Just life, man. I love life, and I'm excited, and I do my gratitudes and trying to do my push-ups. I fell off my work schedule, but I just got big plans, and I'm pretty self-motivated. So yeah, it's just yeah.
Can you recall one book that you've recently read that has significantly impacted your life or your career?
Well, funny that you asked me that, because I just went back to my all-time favorite book, and I'm reading it again. It's Think and Grow Rich, and I'm trying to spend a few 4 or 5 minutes a morning just kind of reading, 6, 7, 10 pages, however much I can, and then just jotting down a couple little nuggets and instituting it into my brain and into my why and my heart. So yeah.
My next question is always, how do you like to pay it forward? And I know that you've recently started a charitable platform of your company called Core Cares. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So we started with Core Cares last year, and right now we're focused on actually another city that was just devastated is the city of Pontiac. Detroit came back and Pontiac did not. And there's a center called the Dream Centers of Pontiac, and it helps poverty, families that have been hit hard. It's education, it's transportation, it's getting them back into the job force, it's meals. So matter of fact, on September 17th, we're hosting an event in Pontiac, and I'm calling on all of my high net worth clients to write the check. We're going to be raising a lot of money. And actually now post-COVID, some of those families have been just devastated. So we're going to be helping them back in the workforce, and it's called Transformation Transportation. So that's we're super stoked about supporting that. So we're starting there. We're going to be doing something for the vets and the military next, and but that right now that's our focus.
Terry, how can our listeners get a hold of you or learn a little bit about you and your business?
Yeah, Terry Judge is my name. Core Solutions Group is the company. You can find me on all the social platforms, LinkedIn, Facebook. Just shoot me a message. I'll leave you my email for those that want to just jot this down. So it's just T and Judge at coreadvisors.net. T-Judge at coreadvisors.net. And we do a lot of pro bono work. We don't charge. We give a lot of advice. I believe in giving first, receiving second. So I can help. We'll do a free analysis on any properties, kind of run the numbers for you, and then we'll see if it makes sense.
Terry Judge, very grateful for your time today, and thank you for adding your value today as well.
Thanks for having me, Nick. I enjoyed it.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to leave a rating and a review, which will help us introduce the podcast to other listeners. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, which will give you access to other episodes you may have missed. Lastly, if you'd like to learn more about investing alongside us, then head on over to valueaddedpodcast.com. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you next week.